People who've had these shots and now they're magnetized. They can put a key on their forehead, it sticks.
It sticks to my neck too.
The fear that 5G is harmful to human health.
In terms of the hesitancy issue, it's real.
We're not getting injected with something that could integrate into our DNA.
So there's plenty of misinformation floating around about COVID vaccines, and a lot of it is making people think twice about taking it.
And that is a threat to public health, to my health, to your health.
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a burgeoning toll on various facets of society. Because we live in the digital age, social media platforms provide access to a diverse proliferation of information, some of which may also be misinformation. And so, in hand with such a pandemic comes an inevitable infodemic, resulting in the dissemination of both reliable and dubious information related to COVID-19. Thus, social media platforms play a large role in shaping vaccine hesitancy by largely perpetuating content based on high engagement rather than based on the reliability of information, and by facilitating the formation of polarized groups by connecting people who are deliberately seeking information that adheres to their worldviews. Our analysis will specifically focus on two platforms, Reddit and YouTube. We consider these particular platforms in a contrasting manner to further quantify and investigate platform-specific differences in public sentiments. YouTube was chosen as it largely permits one to comment and air their opinions in an unmoderated manner, which is to some extent a contrast to Reddit. It also hosts video media rather than post and comment format. On the other hand, Reddit was chosen as it has a community-oriented format with specific topics of discussion called subreddits and a structure that is emulated by the clustering of communities offline as well. Our aim is to assess public sentiments for COVID-19 vaccines in relation to two vaccine-related events. In the past few months, there has been an influx of media relating to the incidence of blood clots with the AstraZeneca vaccine and the emergency authorization of the Pfizer vaccine for children. Accordingly, these are the two events that we will be focusing on. In this project, we aim to identify sentiments and key topics of discussion pertaining to our events of interest with a platform-specific approach. We also aim to extend our platform analysis by taking a closer look at the amplification of information on both platforms, as well as identifying sources of misinformation. Ultimately, the communities of misinformation identified will be used to construct a labeled dataset to develop a misinformation classifier.
To meet our objectives, we conducted several different analyses whose results we used to ultimately create a classifier. First, we extracted posts and comments from Reddit and YouTube using keywords relating to our events, which were AstraZeneca blood clots, Pfizer and children. Next, we performed sentiment analysis to identify the tone associated with the extracted comments. This analysis was done using Vader, which is trained to social media sentiments. The 135 most common words from all Reddit comments were extracted and were added to Vader's lexicon to optimize performance. All three of us assigned sentiment rating to each of the 135 words. Vader outputs positivity, negativity, and neutrality associated with each of the comments on a scale from -1 to 1. Scores below 0 were identified as negative, scores of exactly 0 as neutral, and scores above 0 as positive. Event-specific sentiments were plotted to look at trends over time for both platforms. News relating to our two events were marked on our platforms as well. In order to identify topics of discussion associated with our events of interest, topic modeling analysis was used. A LDA model was used for this. To choose the number of topics for each of the models, the number with the highest mean topic coherence was used. Then percent prevalence of each topic was calculated. For YouTube data, all channels were classified manually as reliable, unreliable, or doctor using media bias fact check. For 8 largest subreddits on Reddit, all posts with URL were classified manually using media bias and fact check into 8 categories. These engagement metrics were calculated for YouTube and Reddit. The engagement matrix for unreliable sources was divided by the one for reliable sources for each video to get the coefficient of amplification. Finally, the media amplification factor was used as the summary measure.
Our analysis yielded many interesting insights. We first found that the platform and time period both influence event-specific discussion topics with negative sentiments. This figure presents 4 panels representing the change in sentiments over specific time periods per platform and per event, annotated with 6 important relevant media events as shown below. Specifically, a platform-specific difference is hinted here. Looking at 6, for instance, where we see an uptick in negative sentiments on YouTube after the press release of FDA authorization of the Pfizer vaccine for children, but an uptick of positive sentiments on Reddit instead. To further incorporate the effects of time on changing topical discussion, topic modeling was performed on comments extracted from the time ranges of peak A and peak B shown in this figure. By doing this, we see a discernible difference in the topics discussed between the 2 time points, even on the same platform and regarding the same events, in terms of an increase in the number of topics related to peak B and the nature of the topics themselves, such as the second peak, which is more associated with topics such as breast cancer comparatively. This figure shows the topics of discussion surrounding the incidence of blood clots associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine for Reddit and YouTube data. In both these figures, we see the discussion of more topics on YouTube comparatively, and seemingly more negative topics as well, such as the one labeled Bill Gates evil. Another important finding was that YouTube amplifies unreliable sources relatively more compared to Reddit, and disproportionately amplifies doctor channels. Specifically, the coefficient of amplification was computed for the ratio of doctors to reliable media sources for Reddit and YouTube, as well as for unreliable to reliable sources, and the results of this are shown in this table. As you can see, a large coefficient of amplification was calculated for the ratio of doctors to reliable information, which suggests a disproportionate influence of doctors on YouTube. Interestingly, we found that unreliable sources and cross-platform media sources are seemingly clustered to specific subreddit communities. Specifically, we found that the subreddits Conspiracy and No New Normal, which are marked with a black arrow here, have a relatively higher proportion of sourced from unreliable media sources. These also have a greater diversity of cross-platform sources, such as shared images and memes, YouTube videos, Gab posts, and Twitter posts from unverified sources. On the other hand, we see that one of the largest communities, our coronavirus, is largely composed of information from only reliable news sources. Our results till this point quantified specific trends of misinformation that are rampant on these 2 platforms. In order to provide a partial solution for the Reddit platform, we accumulated our analysis in a multi-feature classifier.
We do so for identifying misinformation to offer a viable community resource. Specifically, our classifier is able to classify Reddit posts as verified, unverified, or questionable. This represents a more nuanced treatment of misinformation, as unverified is confirmed misinformation, while questionable pertains to posts containing content of which the factuality is still being established. This was done for the purpose of reducing manual moderation load. Unverified posts would completely be removed from the platform, while questionable posts, rather than being removed from the platform, would still be evaluated by a moderator. This is to preserve the line between necessary and dangerous censorship. For building our labeled dataset, verified posts were collected completely from the subreddit coronavirus, and unverified and questionable posts were collected from the subreddit No New Normal. As our analysis identified memes and image-based media to be associated with subreddits containing unreliable information, we also extracted the text from images to account for information from this source as well. In our analysis, we found that there's a significantly more unverified posts with negative sentiments compared to verified posts. To improve classification performance, sentiments were also included as a feature input in this classifier. The features of our LSTM classifier, a type of recurrent neural network, are presented here. From this figure, we do see signs of underfitting of our model, which is likely a consequence of our dataset size. Looking at the confusion matrix, our model is able to distinguish between unverified and questionable information and is able to identify verified information as well. But it is unable to distinguish well between verified and misinformation in general, with a misclassification rate of approximately 47%.
We finally present a summary of our key takeaways. Firstly, we do see indications of platform-specific differences in sentiments across time for the two events, and also see seemingly more negatively oriented sentiments and topics on YouTube. Particularly, this part of our analysis highlights the importance of a combined analysis, including sentiment analysis, topic modeling, and exploratory time series analysis, where negative sentiments can be categorized by the aforementioned sentiment analysis, prominent negative peaks by a time series analysis, and both novel topics and change in topics between prominent peaks by topic modeling. This particular combination is greatly applicable to tailoring public health campaigns according to changing sentiments across time. We also see that public engagement with sources who are doctors is disproportionately larger than with reliable news sources. Importantly, there have been several reported incidents of a small subset of doctors spreading falsehoods about COVID-19. Thus, it seems wise to be moderately wary of this disproportionate influence and to identify such doctors as soon as possible, as they potentially have the influence to engage a large proportion of the public. Through Reddit, we are also able to identify the misinformation trends specifically that they tend to originate and spread largely from small community pockets on social media platforms, including specific subreddits such as conspiracy and no new normal. This gives us insight into the point of introduction of potentially unreliable sources from other platforms onto Reddit and into cross-platform spread in general. Lastly, we do see a trend of greater amplification of unreliable news sources compared to reliable ones on YouTube, which is likely a consequence of the difference in moderation levels between the two platforms. This offers important insights into the sources of misinformation, as well as allows for proper corresponding mitigating actions to be taken by specific platforms. A particularly novel contribution offered by this study is our Reddit classifier, which is capable of accounting for information in memes, accounting for sentiments, and can also distinguish between complete and potential misinformation. Regarding future avenues, more social media platforms should also be included in our analysis to expand the scope of our results pertaining to platform-specific differences. Additional classifier features other than sentiments, such as common words associated with misinformation, can also be added to improve performance with smaller datasets. And finally, it is also necessary to formally evaluate the performance of our edited vector lexicon sentiments as well. All in all, we hope that our study is able to make a significant contribution to existing infodemic and misinformation literature. Thank you.